Hey, Ted here from Mobile Syrup, and in this review we're going to take a look at the BlackBerry DTEK50. This is the company's latest mid-range device that runs on Android and only Android, and is aimed at people who are thinking about security first and foremost. And so it's probably not surprising that BlackBerry would name the device after the very same app that it debuted in the Priv, the company's previous high-end handset launched late last year. And here they are together, and the differences, of course, are pretty stark between them. The Priv has the curved display, the slide-out keyboard, it has different internal specs which are more powerful than the DTEK50, but on the software side the two are very much the same. They run the same version of Android Marshmallow 6.0.1. Part of the reason for that, of course, is because the DTEK50 is not actually an original design. It is a rebadged Alcatel Idol 4, with the exception of the back that we see here, which is a plastic kind of textured back that is kind of rubbery but solid enough where it's easy enough to grip. It's actually pretty good. I liked it personally. And you got the standard micro USB port at the bottom. This is the convenience key here on the side, which can be programmed to launch an app or to do any number of things, which I'll touch on later on. And then the volume buttons, you have the headphone jack, the power button here, which is kind of placed a little bit inconveniently, actually. I don't know that I really liked it there. But otherwise, this is more or less the same device. The Idol 4 looks like a clone, and this phone essentially is a clone. The screen itself is very nice. It's 5.2 inches with 424 pixels per inch. Not bad to look at. If there was an impression that this phone offered a different software experience than the Priv, that's just not the case. So the hub is the same as it is in the Priv. There is no difference here in how BlackBerry's core apps work on this device than they do on the Priv. That you may look at that as a downside, or you may look at it as a drawback, but that's not really the case. The idea here is that you have a mid-range Android phone that has all of what BlackBerry has to offer. Now, of course, the namesake app here, the DTEK50, which is all about securing the phone and making sure that your bases are covered, is exactly the same. Only I found in this case that it covered more of those bases by default than the Priv did when it launched. So as we look at here, apps and permissions, you can figure out what apps have what permissions, what has access to your camera, what has access to any of those things that are listed there. If you're not as in tune with how Android works, this could be very, very convenient, even though there are certain features baked into Android Marshmallow that are already there. Now, you might look at that and say, okay, well, what's the point? There's a redundancy here, right? And to some extent, that's true. I mean, BlackBerry has coined this phone, quote, the world's most secure Android phone, unquote. And they've adorned it that way simply because they've locked certain things down by default. But Android security is largely Google's responsibility. But for those who are new to BlackBerry or even to Android, there may be a benefit here. And then as we move on, there's also BlackBerry's own apps, which are now Hub Plus services that are available to all Android devices but are baked into BlackBerry's. After a 30-day trial on other Android devices, it is then a 99-cent monthly subscription to use them. Of course, BlackBerry users are exempt because those apps are already free on the DTEK50 and the Priv. And then the keyboard, which to me is one of the best available on any phone, is still the same, pretty responsive, more or less what you'd expect from BlackBerry's on-screen keyboard. I almost think that this on-screen keyboard makes the physical one pretty much obsolete, but that's just me. Battery life is decent, but not amazing on this phone. Any app that requires a lot of juice from the processor, the Snapdragon 617, which is not the most energy efficient, is going to sap the thing. But it will hold its own if it's used primarily as a messaging tool and for email and anything business related, which BlackBerry is clearly targeting with this device. Moving on to the camera, there's finally a manual mode here that we can use, and this is good news for shooting good photos, because auto simply isn't good enough sometimes. So that adds some flexibility in terms of using the camera for decent photos. The filters are still there, those are still the same, as you can see here. Didn't see much difference there. Auto mode's not bad, it's okay. HDR auto is an option too, that could help when shooting in certain situations, but I prefer to go with manual as much as possible. And that wraps up the BlackBerry DTEK50, a device the company arguably should have launched before it launched the Priv. For Mobile Syrup, I'm Teddy K. Thanks for watching.